Okay, let's try this again. I just talked for a good 30 minutes. Beautiful, beautiful recording. Amazing, amazing thing. Did not pick up a word. It drives me so crazy how easy it is to be sabotaged by the delicacy of your tools sometimes. I think that is a huge barrier for a lot of people who are not a fan of machines. Just like a barrier in living in the world if you don't like machines or like social machines. A huge part of what I recorded and why I'm so frustrated is that I was talking about the necessity stemming from agricultural times. Sorry, I've been a little ill the past few days, but stemming from like agricultural times, this need to quantify humans as numbers first and as human beings second, especially in leadership, and seeing that be exploited or abused. I was talking about our capacity at this point as a species to be very articulate about the nuances of the relationship between somebody who is operationalizing large numbers of people as their numeric value, whether that's in data or as a general or a general surgeon. And I think at this point we have a fairly nuanced like ability to articulate as like a global collective. The ethics that we expect to see from people who are going to utilize people by their number as opposed to by their humanity. And I think that's a very easy distinction most people understand and can make. Are you treating me like a number? If so, why? Do I accept that? So things like fascism are actually very easy to identify and oppose. It's not in anyone's best interest to have oppressive, totalitarian systems that cull and breed people. For societal wellness. Nobody likes that. That's why we didn't like Brave New World. We were like, oh my god, we could genetically engineer human beings into like gamma, beta, alpha designations and actually like design people to fulfill servant roles and all of this truly horrific stuff. We could. Once we cloned sheep, we were like, oops. You can hear the music, right? Yeah. Good. Okay. It just shows up as very, very small dots compared to my voice, so I just wanted to be sure. Still getting the hang of the new program. Oh, I've just been off in the stratosphere. I've been watching Netflix, obviously. That's my go-to. It has been apple cider vinegar this week. Really nice show. Oh my god. Did such a wonderful job. So sarcastic, so funny, so humanizing, so real. Ugh, yeah, and like you start out feeling that it's gonna be super fake and kind of like silly detective-y and just like lighthearted, and then it just starts getting deeper and more hard hitting, and you're like, oh, you're so right, you're killing me. It's really good. I don't know. They're like hour-long episodes, and it says season one, so there might be more than one season. It came out in 2025, so it was like this year. Super loving the speed at which content can be like facilitated into different spheres. But yeah, great show. What else? Obviously, kind of feeling underwater with everything that's been going on. I love deep sea diving as like a concept, probably not as a reality. But when I was first like, you know, thinking about labor or work from a global perspective and like a global industrial perspective, my education has been nuanced enough to include that because we as a society have come far enough to like ensure that. So awesome. Um yeah, some more than others. It's always some more than others. But yeah, like deep sea diving with like fire or something. It was like welding. Yep, one of the highest paying individual jobs, and the highest risk. One of just the things that like still stands out to me from that early data interrogation about different potential career paths. I told you I wanted to be a trucker, I wanted to be all these things, so I was like, gosh, choosing what you do for life, that's such a big decision. I want to make the right one. Oh no. Oh wow. Who knew artist would be where I would land? It was the most consistent. It was the one that just like kept popping up as like, yeah, this is joy. This is just like pure joy, but there's no way to get paid for that. And that just currently there's no viable way to monetize that, so we're going to have to shelve it. Literally just have like a little dictator economist living in my brain rent free because I got impressed at a young age that it doesn't matter, like money doesn't care about your values or your belief systems or your living experience or anything. Money does not care about you. It's not human. But it is like a human made monster. And as I was mentioning, there is a certain fear and right like understandable like fear and revulsion that we experience towards societal mechanisms to some extent because there's such an ambivalently coded history there when it comes to like should we trust medical authorities or not? Should we, you know, and that's why I am always just like observing things through the lens of like, could this be an educational campaign? Just like with curiosity and trying to imagine circumstances under which this could be interpreted as an educational campaign. And because I try to view media that way, I'm always like really getting educated. That's my secret to learning. I'll just give it to you for free. Is I'm like, could this be an educational campaign? Under what conditions would this be a useful educational campaign? What would the target be? What would, the messaging have to look like? How consistent would it have to be? How would the source look? All of these different aspects. Does that source have like history with the audience in any way? Do we know? Can we know? All sorts of really important questions when thinking about the world. And so it is a filter that I've put a lot of my like media consumption through, is like probably the healthiest way to view news is through basically like my first grade teacher's introduction to us of current events as like a concept. Which like, yeah, I know it's weird that I remember like literally everything. But interpreting current events as though they could be used for an educational campaign, or like, how would I explain this to somebody who like didn't understand it? That's the best, most effective way. I learned much later than first grade, but much later I learned that, it's the most effective way to actually learn and internalize knowledge, is like, can you teach it? And once you get to the point of like, can you teach it? That's the point, that's meant to be mastery. And so when I view media and I look around at the audiences, I see a lot of masters of things, of communicating, really. Quite a lot of nuanced communication is going on, like, as a species. And one thing that I just adore is the way that we speak about our commonalities, and we always, as sort of an act of courtesy, begin with discussing our commonalities. I think that's a really beautiful thing, that I've noticed about interpersonal relating in a global theater, especially in social media. But really, I'm talking about memes, but I'm also talking about Reddit, and a way that a huge portion of our lived experience of being online, of the limited past 20 years for most of the globe, right? But for this like very short span, we have done and accomplished an awful lot when it comes to setting modes and setting norms for interpersonal relating at a global scale. And so this more recent evolution of the TikTok and Red Note is in my view a sort of triumph of human or more of a celebration of our ability to communicate, like our increased courtesy as a collective, as a global collective. And I think that's great. I love celebrating increased literacy. I think that's wonderful. Obviously we have more ways to go, but I'm really excited about what Mexico and Canada are up to. Super huge fans of recent developments. I am a super huge fan personally. But I always have been. I've always been like, oh gosh, I have these deeply ambiguous feelings about my country, living in my country, growing up in my country, loving my land, loving my people, loving a lot of our government and a lot of what our government has done as like in the historical narrative and as like an example for a new type of society that we hadn't had before, where we have so much more mixing of people and it could be so positive. You know, we love positive intergroup contact. That stuff is so fun. You know, that's where you take your friend from the other country out to party. Like that's the whole point, right? We love the tourism industry in some ways because we love participating in it, but we don't love the exploitation aspect of it. And so that's the entire like trouble with what is it, global neoliberalism or something. But American imperialism, American nationalism, and we're seeing some pretty obvious flare-ups of what that looks like. But this is what we're seeing is an abuse of a governmental system, and it's been exploited, it's been abused, it's been consistently abused and exploited by an oligarchical class, and what I would argue again is a small ring of either pedophiles or rich people or both. But I feel the world is really over it. And I don't think, I'm not hearing in the world, and this is grieving me, so I have to say something. I am not hearing many people, understandably so, but I'm not hearing many people stand up for the distinction between US government and the abuse of our governmental systems. And I think that's because the faith has broken down so badly in our very short history as a nation, or a federation of nation states. Our track record is not good with the way that the government has been used to abuse its people, or the people that it claims for its own, often against their will. But to abuse those people and then groom them so it's understandable there's a certain lack of trust going on there. But I do want, as somebody who has, for some ungodly reason, painstakingly put together the picture of our government in, like, from the fractured items I was given throughout the public education system, and having done so, been like, oh, this is really cool if we the people make it work. And so looking around in my life being like, why aren't we the people doing this? Fully at first being willing to kind of like blame lazy countrymen, right? Like my fellow Americans. But the more I investigated, realizing that this was actually like a deeply systemic issue with very specific roots that can be addressed at the root. And that started giving me a lot of hope. I was like, oh, this is not a system that we have to like trash, this like federated city-state thing. It's actually quite closely modeled on the indigenous people who were here for 600, 800 years before colonizers showed up. And it can be reimagined with joy and with love for the people who live there. But it will take, I think, more of a global participatory effort to do so, at least in part because of the way the exploitation of this governmental system has led to a domination of global military industrialism, and it has to end. This can't continue. So far, I haven't met anyone who doesn't agree with that. Of course, I just meet normal people. I don't meet billionaires. But I'm not even convinced that the billionaires and the pedophiles and the secret shadow organizers for the death machine are all necessarily the same group of people. And that's the kind of thing that keeps me up at night. But I watch Netflix and then I realize it keeps everybody else up at night too. And I'm like, yeah. TV, man. Cable TV. And then streaming. And then right back to all of the split streaming services. Oh my God. What a shuffle. Right? How exhausting. How exhausting to the people trapped in the fucking drudgery and oppressive, shitty place that almost our entire population is trapped in. Mentally, emotionally, physically. Americans have the absolute worst life expectancy of the developed world. I think those are the words we're using. The post-industrial, no. It's like, we're like post-technical. We're at a very specific type. It's not postmodern either. I don't know. The people who come up with these words and classify their meanings taxonomically are a very cool and interesting set of people. I think that kind of keeping track of tools is an integral part of our species' survival, so I appreciate that kind of labor. I did design much of my perspective of the world around valuing labor appropriately. And oftentimes I've realized in my life that appropriate is mostly just proportionate, which means ratios, which is one reason I found so much joy in my kitchen mas bread making. I was like, yes, ratios are back, proportions are back. That means appropriateness can be default. It's a blessing and a curse to be this self-observant and capable of articulation, because sometimes I will just lie, or like not lie, but rather make assumptions, and don't give myself the time to really know whether or not that's what it is, or not. And what sucks is that, you know, if you're used to having like kind of a default low self-esteem, you have to actively have like an intentionally positive self-esteem. It's harder to do that kind of thing, to be like, oh yeah, I got myself fucked up. That's not me at all. I'm just making assumptions that I'm bad, essentially, because I'm afraid that I might be bad. And I've noticed a lot of people do that, so I give myself slack and I'm able to articulate it in the sense that I see people do that kind of thing all the time. They make assumptions about their own worth or value because they receive null feedback, as in none, and they interpret it as negative feedback, or the complete lack of feedback leads to the mental voice echo chamber, and the mental voice echo chamber is a shit talker who lies a lot about your worth. That's pretty much what it's like. personally I feel to be human, because I think to be human is to be traumatized by the experience of suffering in the mortal coil, but that's because I felt like I really needed to internalize some tenets of Buddhism in order to survive, and so I did. Once I tracked like the history, that, you know, the documentable primary source, we have constructed a very careful means of determining how we track history and what counts as the full story, and how we put together this mosaic narrative from the like shards and remains of all of the carefully or not so carefully excavated or respected remains of ancient civilizations. Yeah, where was I going with that? It's like, if there was one thing I learned from watching this process, I'm just frustrated that I recorded like a half hour and it got my voice, but it didn't get the music. And I fucking deleted it too. And I could have just not deleted it, and I could have played the voice back over some music on the other half of this, and it could have just been fine. But I was losing my temper, and I just deleted it. And it was a really good take. And so now, at the halfway point, I'm kind of breaking down, wanting to continue in my thoughts. And that's really, you know, that's where we're at. That's the State of the Union. Really been thinking about all sorts of things, so excuse the meander. Let's see, I was talking about having trauma. This is probably also trauma. It's like, you know how your brain just blanks out and then you can't remember stuff? That's trauma. Yeah, totally. It is. Piecing together painstaking narrative of our species. Oh, one thing I got out of carefully tracking, like, as far as I could find, the factual history of all religions around the world, I was like, oh, it all makes sense. And when you do that and you simultaneously get the history of like humanity and their motions throughout the world, and then you get like the history of the tectonic plates and their motions throughout the world, and you start to get this really internalized understanding of time as it relates to your positionality in the solar system or the galaxy or the universe. Perspective takes on a whole new meaning. And it's that particular thing that I've noticed in the generational divide between the young and our elders, is this vision, this opening of the third eye in a way that cannot be closed. And it's so funny because it's an embodied knowledge that people without the the articulated knowledge already have this positionality of our place on this earth, in the world, with the sun. People who grew up with mechanistic over digital tech, for example, I don't know, the gear people more than the Tynes people. But these sort of psychological environments that the people of the time were in during the creation of their tech is a part of what a good archaeologist is looking at when they are thinking about tools recovered from ancient sites within the context of a larger humanity. And the better we fill out this story of our larger species, the more empowered we're going to feel over our choices moving forward as a species. And I know I've made the argument a million times that human beings are essentially just teenagers with low self-esteem. And I know I've made the argument that if we were better listeners to teenage girls, we could solve all of our problems, but I will make it again because I do think it's true. But this is a collective work. People who are painstakingly piecing together historical narratives are working together with folklorists and storytellers and people with lived experience, and they're drawing a combination of sources. It's a collage and a mosaic, and that level of fine detail collage work is really intimidating, especially when handed across generations of human beings. And I think that it's almost an artwork too delicate for us to comprehend when we think with our global consciousness about our accomplishments as a species. We struggle to acknowledge our triumphs and our strengths and the beautiful things that we have created, at least in part because of the struggle with self-esteem. I'm not saying all history is good, obviously, but there's things, right? Like when a lot of people hear history, they think the history books from public school, and that is barely scratching the surface of this mosaic of story that we've like painstakingly pulled together. And to me, that is a failing of imagination, kind of, to think that history could be contained inside of an academic tradition, rather than being a living thing that exists in us, in all of us and our environment every day, because it really did happen and it is really in us now. But I did work really hard to have a holistic view of the life, universe, and everything, because I take being a nerd really seriously. It's very important to me. I've never been steered wrong, by empirically observing the world and making decisions about it. Every other thing has steered me wrong, but that one has not. And I think that is a collectively felt experience that we don't even need to name in order to understand its value. I think a lot of what we fear when it comes to change is a loss of valuing things collectively that were an important part of our understanding of self. Something I said in the Lost 30 Minutes is that a huge aspect, I think, of why people are so afraid of change is that they want to be reassured that they'll still be included in the utopia that gets built afterwards. And this has been backed up by research. I've seen research that shows people shown images of graphs that depict immigrants outnumbering, well, literally just anybody who isn't Caucasian or self-described Caucasian white, outnumbering Caucasian white individuals in the United States by 2030 or something like that. It creates like an instinctual fear response, and I'm like, yeah, they don't want to be left out of the new future. The new utopia makes sense, but it's an existential fear, so it means it's going to be violently expressed when it's not properly regulated. And so it has been. I mean, mean little men always want to be included. That's why they're mean little men. And in a similar way, one of the biggest things that people fear about anarchism or about more hierarchical forms of leadership is it does necessitate dismantling current hierarchical or centralized systems of leadership. And there is a significant amount of fear embedded in what is considered the process of dismantling, because there's an assumption based on previously, like, historically lived experience as a species that the process of dismantling systems is quite bloody and messy. And what I have heard over and over, not just from anarchists, but from every aspect of, like, every avenue of inquiry I've personally gone down, has been that we can be more sophisticated with dismantling systems now. Like, it's actually quite easy. We've become very literate in systems thinking. And although we might not all be on the same page about the different layers of system thinking, from the microbial to the macroorganism to the biosphere, but that is mostly due to a lack of knowledge and education in environmental, like, wellness and literacy, and how good it feels to live within your environmental, like, niche in the body and in the soul, and this ability to have more time with your loved ones, with your hobbies, with your life, this one precious life. I feel us all tilting towards the yearning of that thing. And I think the only thing holding us back is fear that we don't deserve it, fear that it's actually unobtainable, and that the hope for it will end up consuming or crushing us when we discover it will not be obtainable, and we will become shells of ourselves, or, you know, dead inside, or just something terrible will happen. And so there's this reluctance to lean into the overwhelming joyous hope that I feel flaming up in my own heart every time I see the sophistication of our ability to communicate reflected back at me from a variety of different sources, and to be like, oh yeah, humanity is ready. Like, we are set, we are good to go. And it's scary because really, as far as our collective knowledge, our collective awareness of self as species, right? This knowledge of self as species is so new, and it's so tender, and it's delightful. It's a relief in a sense, to existential dread of perceiving ourselves more isolated in our psyche, in our experience of the world, to tap into a collective knowing in the way that we've been able to do in a literal sense with the internet in the last 20 years, but also in a more metaphoric sense. This awareness that other people experience what you experience, that they feel what you feel, has been permeating all of us at the same rate, more or less, and it's been having a wonderful lightening effect on the dread of existence that comes from the isolation of feeling oneself to be alone. And that's powerful to see that being unfolded in real time in a very literal sense with the internet is glorious. But I love the metaphoric sense as well, to see the ways in which our sophisticated means of expressing ourselves has changed now that we have that extra layer of self-awareness. Sometimes that extra layer of self-awareness can be a burden. It can feel like, turtles all the way down and just overwhelmingly hyper observed. Not necessarily a good thing. It can be paralyzing. It can be crushing. But the proper folding of our attention over ourselves as a collective, as a species, and to be able to reflect with one another in real time about our historic experiences, real or imagined, through the process of storytelling, through the avenue of literal interpretation. We have this wonderful ability that is seeing such a glorious I don't want to say renaissance. It's new under the sun. This is I don't know, a kaleidoscope with no certain borders. There's no metaphor for what I see here. And it's really cool. It's really cool to see us just get so good at communicating. And obviously we see this in memes. I have mentioned multiple times how I've seen it in Reddit, the way that we interconnect and empathize with each other. But I think one of my favorite things is the history memes subreddit, in which people are emotionally in real time, reflexively reflecting with one another upon historical events, often across different identities, national identities, or borders, or perspectives. And that was so transcendental as a movement, as a thing to see that happen. And we know scientifically that positive intergroup contact is the best predictor for improved interpersonal relationship. And so to me, that says really good things about our future together on this earth under this biodome. I know I'm going to keep saying it. I love the word biodome. I could say biosphere if you would prefer. No, we like the dome. Okay. Yeah, because it's like Thunderdome. Ooh. Well, there's one, ancient reason we like the dome. Huge fan of our own heads. Yeah, we are. Humans love our own brains. What can we say? We're like, ooh, you're cool. I'm going to feed you. And then we did. We really did. So yeah, I love seeing humanity empathize with itself. I think that's probably our biggest power move since slicing bread, or even making grain. Not making grain. We what do? We bread it, sort of. Breeding is the wrong word. Yeah, the pea people do not like when I use the word breeding. They're a little bit offended just because of everything they know about eugenics. I understand. You know more than me, but I see it in your reticence in the way that you communicate about these topics in your material. But yeah, we're really sophisticated, articulate species. Ooh, I hope we're not too articulated. Um, but it's also a scary time for us to be this self-aware. It really is. Especially with such low self-esteem. As I've mentioned, we collectively do not have the highest self-esteem for obvious reasons. We have a deeply ambivalent past. And it is very possible for people with deeply ambivalent like living experiences to, through increased like self-awareness and self like presence and self-teamwork, to like overcome the low self-esteem. But it's a challenge, and it's going to take everybody, you know, participating as much as they can in cheering each other on and up under, you know, the deeply oppressive experience of knowing that such absolutely awful shit goes on in the world. Ugh, one of my favorite scenes in Apple Cider Vinegar was when this like super absent mom takes her son to the doctor, and the doctor is just like some guy in some upstairs half renovated building in his fucking shorts, like in his what do you call them, not boxers. Yeah, kind of. Yeah, he's not dressed. This man is not dressed, and he's got his socks up, and he's looking very virile, I think is the word. Very authoritative as well. He takes control of the room immediately. But yeah, and so this man like goes, or this woman like brings her son to see this doctor, and then just like sends him in with the doctor alone. And the woman who had come with her is like, "Aren't you gonna go with him?" And she's like, "Oh no, this goes better without me." And I'm not going to give away all the different details of it. It sounds much more sinister than it is. Like they get you through this scene very lightheartedly, and I would urge you to trust the creators. But it was a very tense scene, right? You're like, oh my God, what are you doing? And to me, the use of this scene was really intended to underline something that we all already know. It was more of a, yeah, these ones are in the room with us and we definitely know it, and we're going to make it impossible for you not to notice it, because up until this moment, this topic has never come up. It's just like a normal invisible thing. But you know, up until this point, her son has not really come up either, because as we said, she's a very absent mother, and this is all about her. So it's pretty intense movie, but very good. Or show. Yeah, it's a show. I'm making it sound more of a downer than it is. Honestly, it's really fun and really just like vicious in a good, satisfying way. But I don't know, maybe you don't have as bloodthirsty of a heart as me, and that I understand. It's a very, very bloodthirsty one. I was raised on gratuitous violence. And I'm glad I was, like, just in comparison to the actual violence I have seen in this world, that I think we all have seen in this world. After Palestine, we cannot fail to have seen it in this world. Please, God, no more. But yeah, I'm thinking I probably should not have recorded this today. Oh, yeah, I'm not going to should myself. I'm like, we're behind schedule now. What have I done? But you know, it was fun. And it's Thursday. Let's take a load off. Let's just forgive ourselves for wanting to tell the rest of the world we think it's probably going to be all right. I don't know what else to call it, you know? It's like I just feel all the worry, and it's not just my worry. And I'm like, no, it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. I like this. 714 by DWH. I still can't get over my kitchen. I'm really stoked about it. I made that Irish shortcake again last night, and this time I added more water, and it basically turned it into like cornbread. I'm like, this is cornbread but with regular flour. So I'm gonna try it with cornmeal and see if I can't get cornbread. But I'm also gonna look up cornbread and make sure it's cornmeal that I need. I'm pretty sure it is. Would it be weird to use masa? Like, I've never made cornbread. But now that I've made accidental almost cornbread, I'm really a little gung-ho about making cornbread. What was one of the things I said the other day? It was really good. I was like, all those people up there on the ISS must see that space trash every day. I looked it up once. There's a website that tracks every last piece of debris in our atmosphere, and you can see it all. And it's just really upsetting. And it always reminds me of that Futurama episode where they like throw a ball of trash at a different ball of trash so that it like careens into the sun, and then they solve one problem with another in a sort of stupid way, but it totally works out. Loved that episode. Really reassured me about the entire world. I was like, okay, you're right. We have one mortal life. There is definitely an expiration date on my existence. The best thing I can do, like to keep me from being immobilized towards anything useful for the future, the best thing I can do is, you know, push on for all the people that come later. And like, they don't even necessarily need to be better or smarter than me to succeed where I didn't. They could just be dumb or lucky or receiving some dumb luck. And I love that. I'm like, oh, fuck, yeah, you're right. Error, human, like, just chance. I really do think that's why gamblers get addicted to gambling. It ties into this like deep love for chance. Of course, the house always wins, but I never wanted to go down that road because I like saw early on how much I love probability, and I was like, I can't do it. I'll get addicted. I'll never leave. I also just kind of hated casinos. They're so like smoky and everybody's sad, and yeah, okay, maybe not everybody's sad, but kinda. You're all drinking alcohol. It's a depressant. Yeah, I prefer to get my smoky, sad vibes inside my own head. Thank you very much. There's just a blues club running all the time, but it only ever plays one song. No, I'm just kidding. I don't know. On the grass. Bluegrass. No, I don't know. I can't make all the music puns. Somebody has to help me out. That's not even a pun. I don't even understand jokes. I think my friends like me because it feels like they adopted an alien. And I like that. I like being like a little adopted alien. It's just a sane place to be, I guess. There's so much like travel of people throughout the world. We love stories of immigrants. We love immigrants. It fucking kills me that we treat them like this. But you know, our government does give primacy to, what is it, commerce. Yeah, all of our everything, all of our stuff is organized around us being the commerce babes. That's why the Dutch have always been like, meh. Well, and it also started our relationship with Japan off on a very bad foot. Forcing a xenophobic country, sorry, not necessarily xenophobic, but definitely anti-foreigner country to open its borders was a pretty rude move, my dude. Nakena. Neke. Nako. Neke. Aww. That's cute. Nep. Nep Neko. Thanks. That's really sweet. My right hand man. No, that's the polar bear. The one from Coca-Cola. The Coca-Cola polar bear is my right-hand man. Yes, that's what I said. You have to take back the Coca-Cola industry, is what I'm saying. That's the real moral of the story. What would you do for a Klondike bar? Honestly, not a whole lot. They're okay, you know, but I like it when they're free. Otherwise, I don't chase them. It's pretty much how it's been for me in the Klondike bars since time out of mind. I have no idea what that means within the context of the meme community, by the way. Barely remember why Klondike bars matter, but I know you care. I think I'm gonna get a sticker maker for my birthday.